Hi everybody. I want to go over the unit overview with you, which is due in a week on November 1st, and that is when we'll be meeting in class again. We're going to go up to the Blackboard page, and you're going to see that this assignment is 4 assignments down. It's called the ETWS, which stands for Effective Teacher Work Sample 2. And this is where you're going to create your learning segment overview. And notice that it's draft 1 because you aren't going to be graded on this until I've had a chance to look at it, score it, and give you some feedback. And then you'll do it again for a second draft. Notice also that we don't call this a unit plan, although that's really what it is. It's a short unit plan, and the reason we do that is because this is practice for your EdTPA, and the EdTPA calls the unit plan a learning segment because it's short. It's 3 to 5 lessons, and that's what you're going to be creating, 3 to 5 lessons on your topic. So what I'd like to do first is just to remind you that last week I asked you to read through these models here and draft out a central focus. So if you haven't done that yet, maybe there will be time for you to do that today, but you're going to have to, most likely, since we're short on time, just work ahead. If you did draft out a central focus, just, like a one sentence like this, then I was able to look at it and give you some ideas about how you might develop that into lesson plans. If you haven't done that yet, these are examples. We looked at these in class together, and hopefully you had the opportunity to look at these also. A central focus is really just one statement, so students will be able to understand and apply skills to successfully answer extended response questions. And notice too that in your central focus, in these anyhow, there isn't any mention of outliers. So these are just kind of general central foci, but we'll look at some specific ones that have to do with outliers, okay? I want to show you, this is really important. This is the tool that you're going to be using to create and submit your learning segment overview. This is the planning template, so it's at the very top. And let's take a look at this on my messy desktop. Okay. The first thing that I want to say is that there's more on this than you need to complete. So these last two requirements, connecting your plans and your summative assessment, you're not going to work on those for November 1st. We're going to do that together in class on November 1st. You will complete these two topics when you submit these for your second draft that will be scored. Okay, so we're just looking right now. Let me just make it a little wider. Okay. We're just looking right now at the learning segment overview and the topics, the first couple of topics. So what you're going to do is you're going to write in what is the central focus for the content. In this section, what are the learning objectives that students will learn? And what you want to do here is first you want to start with the skills. So if this were a PE class, for example, students will learn the necessary cues to dribble the basketball. Okay, So you're going to write out specifically as you can, whatever skills you think your students will develop in working with your central focus. And then you also want to include conceptual understanding. That is most likely going to be outliers. So students will be able to demonstrate their understanding of the importance of hard work by practicing the skill multiple times and explaining how they improved as a result of practice and hard work. And just notice that when you're writing about understandings and concepts, you don't want to just say students will be able to understand. That's a really good way to start, but you want to push yourself to work with this word. Students will be able to demonstrate their understanding. And that kind of pushes you to figure out how you're going to be looking to see if your students actually do understand an idea or a concept, because we can't just look at a student's face to see if they understand or not. We have to see a demonstration of that. Now, your content standards. These are going to be standards that when you imagine what your learning segment is going to have in it, standards that you're going to hit. And so, again, we've looked at your discipline-specific standards. Those are your SHAPE standards or your NCTM standards. And of course, they are from Math, the Common Core Learning Standards. And you worked with those a couple of times on Blackboard, so hopefully you remember where those are. You're also going to include at least one ELA standard, and that would be a standard that, we've worked with those ELA standards before. And so this would be one ELA standard per lesson. So you want to have a couple of ELA standards that you would like to work with in a unit. I think for all of your disciplines, really lean on the speaking and listening standards because those are going to be the primary ones. But also push yourself to find a reading and a writing standard as well that you think students could work with in your typical PE, math, or health class. And remember, you've already done some work with those standards and thinking about that, so you might want to reference your notes. So you're going to write your standards out. And then your prior knowledge. So this would be what skills and understandings do students already have that help them to be successful with this learning segment. Well, this is sort of fictional and made up. You don't really quite know yet. So you kind of have to imagine. But one thing that we know for sure is that students have read, and then you can write whatever chapter, in Outliers. And notice that I'm going to italicize that because it's a book title. Okay, so they've already read, you can assume, that chapter in Outliers, so that's going to be some prior knowledge that they have. Then if you're working with particular skills and understandings in a discipline, if you're doing a basketball unit, for example, and you're imagining that it's 8th grade, some of your students are going to have some prior knowledge working in basketball. So they're going to have some rudimentary skills, you can assume. And I think that could be true for math also. If you're working in an 8th grade classroom, you can assume that they know, their 4 operations, and maybe they've had some work, some sort of basic work, with algebra. And for health, prior knowledge, if you're doing a unit on nutrition, for example, maybe you can imagine that by 8th grade, they already know what certain nutrients are. And so that's where you're kind of guessing, but we want you to practice that now so that when it's time for you to go into student teaching and do the EdTPA, you kind of have an idea that you really need to build on the prior knowledge that your students have, and you don't just kind of make up a unit. based on, just whatever. You want to be thinking about what can they do, what do they know at this age? And again, you're just giving it your best guess, okay? That would be the same thing for common errors and misconceptions, So for example, if you're doing a basketball unit, already that, some students may dribble the ball too high, or they may sort of slap the ball when they dribble. For math, if you're working with order of operations, that students are going to forget that they have to do the work in the parentheses first. So there are going to be misconceptions. And again, right now you're just kind of taking your best guess and you're using your imagination based on what you know about students from your observations or what you remember about, sort of the work you were doing or what you knew as an 8th grade student. But again, as we move into student teaching in the EdTPA, the common errors and misconceptions are going to become very real. You're going to have very real students, and we'll talk about how you assess those, okay? And again, so for the unit plan due on the 1st, the connecting your plans and the summative assessment does not have to be done, okay? So let's just take, a sample. I'll just take the top one, but notice, there's, let's see, we have a PE one, we have a math one, we have a health one, we have another PE one, and we have another math one. So if we take John Matea's up and look at it, where is he? Okay. All right. This part you don't need to worry about. This is old, okay? He has his central focus, his objectives, his content standards, prior knowledge he's guessed at, and then errors and misconceptions. And then if you have time, you can look and see how he's doing the connecting your plans and the summative assessment, but we don't need to worry about that piece yet, okay? So notice that he's saying students will demonstrate their understandings, that Outliers is an important book. It's about opportunity, okay? And then students will demonstrate proficiency in taking advantage of opportunities to the best of their abilities by successfully completing a basketball free throw, hockey shot, or football pass. So notice that in the central focus, he has both the Outliers piece, and that's kind of the concept, and then he also has the skills piece, which is his discipline, which is physical education. Then he has his learning objectives. Okay, so these are the goals that he hopes his students will learn as they work through the lessons that, you don't even have to think about creating yet, because we're going to do that together. Then he has his content standards, and notice he doesn't have, this is a couple years ago, so he doesn't have his ELA standards, but he's got his shape standards. And then you can read through the prior knowledge. Students will have the prior knowledge of needed skills by already having acquired the commencement level of the skill needed to score in all of the different sports in order to complete this learning segment. So again, he's kind of guessing, right? Students will have the prior knowledge on what is expected of them when they are in a physical education classroom. So these don't have to be like earth-shattering. Again, you're just kind of practicing. And then for misconceptions, one misunderstanding here is terminology. So when working with these particular sports, he's going to say, I'm looking at the highlighted one, misunderstanding terminology such as elbow in, don't look down, flick your wrist, elbow parallel, etc. So how is he going to address it? He'll review the terminology. Okay, so again, what you're going to be submitting on the 1st of November is going to look like this page, prior knowledge, okay? And then this top box, the errors and misconceptions. All of the rest of this we're going to leave for now. So you're going to notice as you look through these models, and hopefully you've already done that, you're going to notice that it's not a lot of writing, but it's a lot of thinking, okay? So you really want to give this a lot of thought. And again, it's a first draft. I'm going to give you some feedback. And then the last thing that I want to point out is that, for all of these, you do have a rubric, right? So if you're not sure what makes, you've got your models, you've got me talking you through it today. But if you still aren't quite sure what's going to make a good, solid learning outcome plan, you can look at the rubric because it's pretty specific, right? So let's just look at this first criteria. Learning segment articulates a central focus, okay? And notice just in your standards for your own information, these are very connected again, to the Ed TPA, okay? So if you don't have a clearly described central focus, it's going to be ineffective. It's most likely going to be developing, so the plan includes a central focus, but the rationale for selecting the focus may not be clearly articulated, or it might be completely inappropriate or realistic. So for example, we looked at John Matea's central focus. If that had said something about, mastering all of the skills and being able to successfully play in all three of those sports, that might be inappropriate or unrealistic. He is really narrowing in on, three particular skills, which would be related to scoring. Okay. The learning objectives connect with a central focus. They address both skills and understandings. These are going to be your learning standards, and notice I actually tell you how many, right? So you've got at least 3 standards in there that connect, okay? And so you can go through and you can actually read and see what it is that it takes to get you to the effective. This is where you ultimately want to end up. This is your A, okay? This is probably where you're going to be if you do a good solid draft, and then I will give you feedback to help you move over into that direction. Okay, so I think I've answered any questions or anticipated any questions that you may have on this assignment. And again, this is small. It takes a lot of thinking and a lot of planning and looking at the models, looking at the rubrics, but you can do it, and then you're going to get some feedback to go on to the next steps. All right, so good luck, and be in touch with me if you have questions.